The Twin Paradox. Prologue, the Winter of Desperation. The Breaking Point. The winter wind lashed against the windows of Mercy General Hospital, a symphony of despair that matched the internal turmoil of Agnes Rollins. The sterile white walls of the break room seemed to close in on her, a metaphor for the mounting pressures that threatened to crush her spirit entirely. Agnes Rollins was not just a nurse, she was a single mother battling a perfect storm of medical and financial challenges. Her daughter Rebecca, now a teenager, had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 2 years ago. The constant medical expenses, the specialized insulin, the endless doctor's appointments, they were slowly draining every resource Agnes had ever accumulated. Her colleague Marie found her in a moment of raw vulnerability. Agnes's hands, typically steady from years of medical training, now trembled as she held two newborn files, each representing a potential lifeline. A desperate solution to her seemingly insurmountable problems. "I can't keep going like this," Agnes whispered. Her voice a mixture of exhaustion and something more dangerous, a hint of resignation that suggested she was contemplating actions beyond conventional solutions. Marie knew Agnes well. They had worked together at Mercy General for over a decade, and she had watched her friend transform from a bright-eyed young nurse to a woman worn down by systemic challenges. The healthcare system, with its labyrinthine bureaucracy, had systematically stripped away Agnes's hope. "The bills are astronomical," Agnes continued, her eyes fixed on the newborn files. "I've applied for every possible assistance program. Social services, medical grants, community support, nothing provides enough relief. Rebecca barely speaks to me anymore. She knows how much stress I'm under, and it's killing me to see her blame herself." The context slowly revealed itself. Two couples in the hospital, Elizabeth and Robert Miller, and Sarah and Michael Rothschild, had been struggling with infertility for years. Both had undergone multiple treatments, experienced heartbreaking miscarriages, and were now at their emotional and financial breaking point. Elizabeth Miller, at 38, carried the weight of 6 failed pregnancies. Her husband Robert, a high-powered investment banker more accustomed to negotiating multi-million-dollar deals than handling emotional vulnerability, watched helplessly as each attempt at parenthood crumbled. The clinical detachment that served him well in boardrooms was utterly ineffective in confronting their personal tragedy. Sarah and Michael Rothschild mirrored their pain. Years of trying, multiple fertility treatments, and countless hopes dashed, the journey to parenthood had become a marathon of medical interventions and emotional toll. What Agnes saw in those newborn files was more than just medical records. They represented possibility. Potential, a solution that existed in a moral gray area, but one that seemed increasingly justifiable under her crushing circumstances. The hospital's fluorescent lights flickered, casting strange shadows. Agnes understood the delicate ethical line she was contemplating. Her nursing background screamed about the moral implications, but her maternal instinct, her desperate need to secure a future for Rebecca, was whispering an alternative narrative. Marie sensed the dangerous current of Agnes's thoughts. "Whatever you're thinking," she said softly, "there are always other ways." But Agnes had heard those platitudes before. Bureaucratic reassurances, well-meaning but ultimately hollow statements that did nothing to address the concrete challenges of survival. Outside, the snowstorm intensified, a fitting metaphor for the internal storm brewing within Mercy General's walls. Agnes Rollins stood at a crossroads, the newborn files clutched in her trembling hands, about to make a decision that would irrevocably alter multiple lives. The twin paradox was no longer just a theoretical concept. It was becoming a very real, very human dilemma. Chapter 1, The Exchange. The hospital's night shift was a realm of muted sounds and shadowy corridors, where secrets could be whispered and lives could be irrevocably altered. Michael Rothschild moved like a ghost, his expensive Italian loafers making no sound against the linoleum floor. The manila envelope in his hand felt impossibly heavy, not just from the cash it contained, but from the weight of the moral compromise it represented. Mercy General Hospital had seen its share of desperate moments, but nothing quite like this. Agnes Rollins stood with her back to the wall, a silhouette illuminated only by the intermittent flashes of medical equipment. Her nursing uniform, typically a symbol of care and healing, now felt like a costume concealing a profound betrayal. The desperation that had driven her to this moment was etched into every line of her face, the unpaid medical bills for her daughter Rebecca's diabetes, the mounting pressure of single parenthood. The system that seemed designed to crush those already struggling. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Michael whispered, his voice a fragile thread in the quiet corridor. Agnes's eyes were steel, no trace of maternal warmth, no hint of the moral conflict that had likely torn her apart in previous weeks. She had made her decision, and there was no turning back. 2 sets of parents, 2 identical babies. 1 solution. Michael Rothschild was not a man accustomed to uncertainty. As a successful corporate lawyer, he was used to navigating complex negotiations, to finding solutions where others saw only problems. But this was different. This was personal, this was about life itself. His hand trembled slightly as he extended the envelope. Crisp $100 bills, neatly stacked and counted. The price of a child. The price of hope. But is it right? Michael's voice cracked. Will we ever be able to tell her the truth? Agnes's response was immediate, sharp, a blade cutting through his hesitation. I already told you nobody needs to know. Are you telling me you want to back out now? The subtext was clear, there was no going back. The transaction would proceed. Elizabeth and Robert Miller waited in a nearby room, oblivious to the negotiation taking place. Elizabeth, who had endured 6 heartbreaking miscarriages, whose body had repeatedly failed her most fundamental desire to become a mother. Robert, the stoic investment banker who approached this final attempt at parenthood with the same calculated precision he brought to his professional life. Sarah Rothschild, meanwhile, sat in another room. Her hands, typically steady from years of surgical nursing, now trembled. She understood the delicate negotiations better than most, the medical complexities, the human desperation that could drive someone to extraordinary measures. The exchange, when it happened, was swift and clinical. One girl went home with the Millers, christened Martha Elizabeth Miller. Her birth certificate would reflect a carefully constructed narrative, with dates and details meticulously aligned. To the world, she would be the long-awaited child of Elizabeth and Robert, a miracle after years of struggle. The other became Sarah and Michael Rothschild's secret, a child acquired through means that would never see the light of day. What neither couple realized was that Agnes Rollins had her own motivation. This was not just about money. This was about survival, about securing a future for her daughter Rebecca. About finding a way out of the merciless cycle of medical debt and systemic poverty. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the hospital's windows, 2 families were about to be forever changed. 2 babies, identical in every physical way, were about to embark on radically different life journeys. The twin paradox was no longer a theoretical concept. It was now a lived reality. Chapter 2, Growing Suspicions. The Miller household had always been a study in carefully maintained appearances. From the outside, it seemed perfect, a picturesque home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, with Robert Miller's successful career as an architect and Elizabeth's meticulous housekeeping. But beneath the polished surface, tensions had been simmering for years, growing more intense with each passing season. Elizabeth Miller stood by the kitchen window, her hands gripping a porcelain teacup so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The setting sun cast long shadows across the immaculate kitchen, mirroring the growing darkness of her thoughts. She had been wrestling with a secret, a suspicion, that had been gnawing at her for years. That evening, after the daughters had retreated to their rooms, Elizabeth could no longer contain her growing unease. She cornered her husband, Robert, in his study, a room that had always been his sanctuary, lined with architectural drawings and meticulously organized bookshelves. Robert, she began, her voice a careful blend of accusation and desperation, Anna asked me again today about her musical talent. She paused, watching her husband's face. Where does it come from? Neither of us has ever shown such exceptional musical ability. Robert looked up from his paperwork, his face a mask of controlled irritation. Elizabeth, he said, his tone clipped and dismissive, she's a child with talent. We've provided her with lessons, encouraged her practice. What more is there to discuss? But Elizabeth wasn't deterred. Her eyes, typically soft and acquiescent, now burned with an intensity that momentarily caught Robert off guard. Sometimes, she whispered, leaning closer, when I look at her, it's like I'm looking at a stranger. Not our daughter, someone else entirely. Robert's facade cracked for just a moment, a fleeting expression of something between fear and anger crossed his face before he composed himself. Enough, he said firmly. These are the imaginings of an overwrought mother. In her bedroom, Anna overheard fragments of the conversation. At 16, she had developed an uncanny ability to catch whispers, to sense the unspoken tensions that permeated her home. Her twin sister, Chloe, was different, more vulnerable, more anxious. The next day at school, during their lunch period, the fundamental difference between the twins became apparent. They sat together, as they always did, but the dynamic was subtly complex. Chloe picked at her food, her napkin twisted into a tight knot between her trembling fingers. "I'm going to fail," she whispered, her voice laden with a defeat that seemed to precede the actual event. Anna's response was immediate and unwavering. She wrapped her arm around her sister, a gesture that was both protective and slightly possessive. "You always say that," she said with absolute certainty, "and you always ace it." There was something in her tone, a confidence that went beyond sisterly support. Something that suggested she knew more than she was letting on. Chloe looked up, her eyes meeting Anna's. For a moment, something passed between them, a connection that transcended the typical bond of twins. "Do you ever feel different?" Chloe asked. "Like we're the same, but not quite." Anna's laugh was musical, almost too perfect. "We're twins," she said, echoing the simple explanation they had used countless times before. "We're supposed to be different and the same." But beneath the casual response, something else lingered, a secret, a tension, a truth that was slowly taking shape but had not yet been fully revealed. The Miller family was balanced on the edge of a revelation, with Elizabeth's suspicions growing, Robert's careful denials becoming more strained. And the twins, Anna and Chloe, holding onto a connection that was far more complicated than anyone realized. Something was coming, something that would shatter the carefully constructed facade of their perfect life. Chapter 3, The Revelation. The day began like any other, with the mundane rhythm of routine medical screenings at Oakwood High School. No one could have anticipated how a simple blood test would unravel the carefully woven fabric of the Miller family's existence. Principal Howard Harrison's call came mid-morning, his voice a clinical instrument of destruction. Elizabeth Miller listened, her world narrowing to the sound of his measured words. "There's a genetic discrepancy we must discuss," he said, each word carefully chosen. "The standard genetic screening for twins Anna and Chloe has revealed complications." Elizabeth's fingers gripped the kitchen counter, her knuckles turning white. "Complications," she repeated, her voice a whisper. The principal's explanation was a surgical dissection of their reality. The twins' DNA mirrored each other in an extraordinary way, identical in pattern, yet fundamentally different. More shockingly, their blood types were scientifically impossible for biological siblings. It was as if they had been constructed, not born. The revelation set in motion a maelstrom of confrontations, of long-buried secrets finally breaking through the surface. The nursing home confrontation. Agnes Reynolds sat in her carefully arranged room at Sunset Meadows Nursing Home, a shell of the woman she had once been. Once a powerful figure in reproductive medicine, she was now reduced to a frail elderly woman surrounded by the ghosts of her past decisions. The room filled with a tempest of emotions as Elizabeth burst in, followed by Sarah Rothschild and Michael, the parents whose lives Agnes had manipulated decades ago. "How could you?" Elizabeth's voice trembled, a mixture of rage and profound hurt. "How dare you play God with our lives? With our children?" Sarah Rothschild, always the more emotional of the two, wept openly. Tears streamed down her face, cutting tracks through her carefully applied makeup. "We loved her," she said, her voice breaking. "We cherished Anna and Chloe. Was all of that a lie?" Agnes looked small, defeated. The weight of her past actions seemed to physically compress her into the chair. "I needed the money," she said, her voice a thin whisper. "And you, all of you, wanted children so badly. No one was supposed to be hurt." Michael stood, his body vibrating with suppressed anger. "No one was hurt," he erupted. "You shattered our lives, you robbed us of the truth, of the chance to make our own choices." Anna's intervention. In the midst of this emotional hurricane, Anna stepped forward. At 16, she displayed a wisdom that seemed beyond her years, calm, centered, almost otherworldly. "Please," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a beam of light, "stop. This isn't helping anyone. We're still here. We're still a family, just different." The room fell silent. Anna's words hung in the air, a testament to a maturity that belied her age. She looked at Agnes, not with anger, but with a peculiar mix of understanding and something else. Something more complex. Chloe, typically more reserved, moved closer to her sister. Their connection was palpable, two halves of a whole, yet fundamentally unique. The unraveling truth. What emerged was a story of desperation, scientific ambition, and ethical boundaries shattered. Agnes Reynolds, once a leading researcher in genetic engineering, had been part of a controversial program exploring the boundaries of human reproduction. The twins were not just a result of medical intervention, they were a testament to scientific possibilities that pushed ethical boundaries. Anna and Chloe were more than siblings. They were a living experiment, a proof of concept that challenged everything known about genetic inheritance and human reproduction. The room remained charged with unresolved emotions. Questions hung in the air like invisible weights. Who were Anna and Chloe, really? What made them so uniquely connected? And how would this revelation change everything they thought they knew about themselves? The truth had been revealed, but its full impact was yet to be understood. Chapter 4, Reconciliation. The aftermath of Agnes Reynolds' revelation was not a clean break, but a complex tapestry of emotions, negotiations, and gradual understanding. The families found themselves navigating uncharted emotional territory, a landscape that defied traditional definitions of family, belonging, and identity. In the days following the confrontation, an uneasy truce emerged. The Miller and Rothschild families, once separated by secrets, now found themselves inexorably linked by something far more profound than biological connection. Their first true moment of healing came unexpectedly, during a tense dinner at the Rothschild home. The dining room, typically a place of formal gatherings, became an arena of raw honesty and unexpected humor. Chloe, true to her analytical nature, broke the suffocating silence. Her voice was matter of fact, tinged with a hint of scientific detachment that both families had come to recognize. So, she said, looking around the table, we're technically sisters. And not sisters, and sisters. The statement hung in the air for a moment, absurd, yet perfectly true. Anna, never one to let tension linger, burst into laughter. It was her trademark response, humor as a bridge, laughter as a healing force. Quantum sisters, she declared, her eyes sparkling with mischief. We exist in multiple states of familial relationship simultaneously. The room erupted. Sarah Rothschild, who had been holding back tears, found herself laughing. Elizabeth Miller, still processing the magnitude of the shared secret, joined in. Even Robert and Michael, typically more reserved, couldn't help but chuckle. It was a breakthrough moment. Not a resolution, but an acknowledgement, of complexity, of love that transcended biological boundaries. Epilogue, beyond biology. Years passed. The initial shock transformed into a unique family dynamic that defied conventional understanding. Family gatherings became celebrations of their extraordinary journey, a testament to love's ability to reconstruct and redefine. Anna, now in her late 20s, had become a renowned genetic researcher, a path that seemed both an homage to and a challenge against Agnes Reynolds' legacy. Her work focused on the ethical boundaries of genetic science, always with a deeply personal understanding of its human impact. During one such family gathering, a warm summer evening with multiple generations present, Anna would often reflect on their journey. Family, she would say, her eyes bright with a wisdom that seemed to transcend her years, is not about blood. It's about choice, about love. Michael Rothschild, who had long since embraced both Anna and Chloe as his daughters, would add his perspective. His voice, soft with emotion, carried the weight of the shared history. Sometimes, he would say, looking around at the family they had created, the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. Chloe, now a respected therapist specializing in complex family dynamics, would typically sit nearby, a silent testament to their journey. Her work, deeply influenced by their own story, focused on helping families navigate complex emotional landscapes. The twin paradox, their story, became more than just a personal narrative. It was a profound exploration of human connection, of love's capacity to transcend biological limitations, of family as a chosen, constructed experience rather than a predetermined fate. In the end, what remained was not the pain of deception, but the profound beauty of connection. A family bound not by genetic code, but by choice, by understanding, by a love that refused to be constrained by traditional definitions. Their story was a testament to the complexity of human love, messy, imperfect, yet ultimately transformative.